Have you ever felt that uncomfortable sensation of explaining something obvious to someone who looks at you with a mixture of boredom and disdain? That moment when you realize that your expertise, your knowledge, carefully cultivated over years, is not only undervalued, but actively despised? If you're someone who dedicates time to thinking deeply about the world, to studying, to reflecting on the complexities of human existence, I need to warn you about something coming in 2026 that might catch you off guard. It won't be a dramatic persecution of intellectuals. There won't be public book burnings or mass imprisonment of academics. It will be something much more subtle, and perhaps because of that, much more devastating. The complete social contempt for traditional wisdom and deep thinking. We are witnessing the birth of a new era where speed has replaced depth, where the ability to produce instant answers has become more valuable than the skill of asking fundamental questions. In 2026, this transformation will reach its tipping point, and those who insist on maintaining the ancient rituals of careful thought, meticulous analysis, and patient reflection will discover they are not merely ignored, but seen as irritating obstacles to progress. To understand how we arrived at this point, we need to look back and recognize that this is not the first time in human history that established wisdom has faced a crisis of relevance. When Gutenberg invented the printing press, the monastic scribes who spent years copying manuscripts by hand suddenly found themselves obsolete. Their meticulous art, their intimate knowledge of every word and phrase, their almost spiritual dedication to the text, all of it became irrelevant overnight. But there was a fundamental difference. Society still valued the knowledge contained in books. It just changed the way of producing them. The scribes were replaced, but reverence for learning remained. What is happening now is qualitatively different. We are not simply changing the methods of knowledge production and dissemination. We are questioning the very value of deep knowledge itself. In an era where any question can be answered instantly by artificial intelligence, where any complex problem can be broken down into optimized algorithms, where every decision can be based on real-time data, what exactly is the value of a human being who has spent decades studying philosophy, history, literature, or even sciences? The answer that 2026 society is beginning to give is none. And this answer doesn't come accompanied by anger or resentment, but by something much worse, by total indifference. The contempt that the wisest will face will not be the passionate contempt of revolutionary times, when intellectuals were seen as dangerous enemies who needed to be silenced. It will be the cold and calculating contempt of a society that simply no longer sees utility in what they offer. Think about how we already treat other groups we consider obsolete. We don't hate artisans who make shoes by hand. We simply buy mass-produced sneakers and move on. We harbor no hostility toward elevator operators. We just use the automated buttons and don't even think about it. This is the same casual indifference that awaits those who have dedicated their lives to cultivating human wisdom. They will become historical curiosities kept in universities like natural reserves for intellectual tourists, but completely disconnected from the real centers of power and decision-making in society. What makes this situation particularly cruel is that it catches the wise in their zone of greatest vulnerability. The belief that truth and knowledge are intrinsically valuable. They were trained from early on to believe that dedicating one's life to deep understanding of reality is not just a career choice, but an almost sacred vocation. They internalized the idea that their quest for understanding serves a greater purpose, that it contributes to the collective well-being of humanity. In 2026, they will discover that humanity simply no longer wants this contribution. The technology making this possible is not just artificial intelligence, although it is certainly the most obvious catalyst. It is an entire infrastructure of optimization that permeates every aspect of human experience. Apps that tell us what to eat, algorithms that choose our romantic partners, systems that decide which news we should see, programs that write our emails and create our presentations. In each case, the promise is the same. Why waste time thinking when you can simply get the right answer instantly? And here lies the cruel paradox that the wise will face. The more they try to explain why deep thinking still matters, the more they will seem disconnected from the practical reality that governs daily life. When a philosopher insists we need to think carefully about the ethical implications of a decision, while an algorithm has already calculated the optimized answer in milliseconds, who will seem more useful? When a historian wants to teach us about the complex patterns of the human past, while an AI can predict the future based on trillions of data points, who offers more tangible value? The obvious answer is that human wisdom offers something algorithmic optimization cannot. Meaning, context, the ability to question not just how something works, but why it should work that way. But this answer presupposes a society that still values these qualities. And that is exactly what is changing in 2026. Meaning will become a luxury that few people will feel they can afford, and context will be seen as an unnecessary obstacle to efficiency. We can see the first signs of this transformation in the very spaces that traditionally valued deep knowledge. Universities are increasingly focused on metrics of employability and return on investment. Publishers are prioritizing books that can be summarized in actionable key points. Even media outlets that once prided themselves on in-depth analysis now compete for attention based on the speed and simplicity of their messages. What will make 2026 the tipping point is that this process will reach critical mass. It will no longer be an emerging trend, but the new normal. An entire generation will have grown up completely immersed in instant optimization systems, and to them, the idea that someone would need to spend years studying something in depth will seem genuinely absurd. It will be like trying to explain to someone raised with GPS why it would be useful to memorize maps. Let me pause for a moment to ask, do you also feel this growing pressure to simplify everything you know? This sensation that every time you try to share something you learned through careful study and deep reflection, the people around you seem impatient, as if you're wasting their time with unnecessary details? I know that many of us who value deep knowledge carry this frustration in silence, trying to find ways to make our wisdom more palatable to a world that seems increasingly uninterested in it. If this feeling resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. It can be as simple as writing, "I feel this pressure to simplify when," filling in with your personal experience. Your reflection can help others who are struggling with the same tension between depth and practicality, showing that we are not alone in this crossroads between wisdom and efficiency. The most bitter irony of this entire situation is that the very artificial intelligence systems that are making human sages obsolete were created by some of the most brilliant minds of our time. The engineers and computer scientists who build these optimization tools are themselves examples of deep thinking and rigorous intellectual dedication. But they created systems that, by their very nature, value speed and efficiency above contemplation and wisdom. It is as if the last great thinkers of humanity had built a machine designed to make thinking unnecessary, and the machine is working exactly as planned. It is solving problems, optimizing processes, increasing productivity, and in the process, systematically eliminating any perceived social need for deep human reflection. What makes this especially challenging for the wise is that they cannot simply reject these tools and continue as before. The pressure to adopt optimization systems comes from all sides. Employers demanding greater productivity, students expecting instant answers, colleagues using AI to produce work faster, editors wanting more accessible content. To resist means becoming increasingly isolated and irrelevant, but to adapt means essentially abandoning everything that makes their wisdom distinctive. A philosopher who uses artificial intelligence to write essays more quickly may be more productive, but are they really still a philosopher? A historian who depends on algorithms to identify patterns in historical data is still practicing history or simply managing an automated process? A poet who uses AI to generate verses more efficiently is still creating art or just curating algorithmic outputs? These questions have no easy answers, and that is exactly what makes them irrelevant to a society focused on efficiency. In 2026, no one will have time or patience for subtle debates about the nature of intellectual authorship or the limits of human creativity. These issues will be seen as philosophical luxuries for people who have too much time and too few practical responsibilities. The most profound transformation that will happen in 2026 will not be merely technological, but epistemological. Our fundamental understanding of what counts as valid knowledge will change. For millennia, humans valued the kind of knowledge that comes through accumulated experience, careful reflection, learning from mistakes, and gradual synthesis of complex insights. This process is inherently slow, often inefficient, and impossible to optimize. In contrast, the knowledge model that will dominate in 2026 will be based on instant data processing, algorithmic pattern recognition, and continuous optimization. This model is fast, efficient, and infinitely scalable, but it is also fundamentally different from how humans have traditionally learned and grown. The result is that people who dedicated their lives to mastering the old model of knowledge will discover that their skills are not just less valued, but genuinely incomprehensible to a society operating under completely different principles. It will be as if they spoke a language that no one else can understand or see reason to learn. This mutual incomprehension will create a chasm that will be almost impossible to cross. On one side will be the wise, frustrated by the apparent superficiality of a world that chooses convenience over depth. On the other will be the rest of society, irritated by the apparently stubborn insistence of a group of people in complicating things that can be solved simply and efficiently. What makes this division particularly tragic is that both sides will be, in a certain sense, correct. The wise will be right that something essentially human is being lost in the race for optimization. Society will be right that the practical results of AI systems are in most cases superior to those that can be achieved through traditional human thinking. This is the nature of the contempt that awaits the wisest in 2026. It will not be based on ignorance or misunderstanding, but on a cold and rational assessment that what they offer simply is not worth the opportunity cost. In a world where every second counts and every decision can be optimized, the luxury of spending months or years reflecting on a single idea will seem not just unnecessary, but morally questionable. Imagine trying to explain to someone why it is worth spending 4 years studying literature when an AI can read and analyze every book ever written in a matter of hours. Or why someone should dedicate decades to the study of philosophy when algorithms can identify the logical implications of any ethical position in seconds, or why human experience and intuition still matter when empirical data can inform every aspect of decision-making. The answers to these questions exist, but they require exactly the kind of slow and careful thinking that 2026 society will no longer have patience to consider. It is a perfect vicious circle. The more the wise try to defend the value of wisdom, the more they demonstrate their own irrelevance to a world that values quick answers above deep questions. But perhaps there is a different perspective on this transformation worth considering. Perhaps what is happening is not simply the decline of human wisdom, but evolution toward a completely new form of collective intelligence. Perhaps the resistance of the wise is not a noble defense of eternal values, but the natural reluctance of any specialized group to accept that their time has passed. Throughout history, there has always been tension between established experts and new forms of knowledge. Medieval scribes resisted the printing press, artisans resisted industrialization, human operators resisted automation. In retrospect, we can see that while something valuable was lost in each transition, something even more powerful was gained. It is possible that traditional human wisdom is just another of those capacities that had its moment of maximum utility, but is now being replaced by something superior. Perhaps the ability of an AI to process vast amounts of information and identify subtle patterns is genuinely more valuable than the human capacity to reflect deeply on individual ideas. If this perspective is correct, then the contempt that the wise will face in 2026 will not be a tragic cultural loss, but a necessary adjustment to a new reality. It will be painful for those who dedicated their lives to cultivating traditional wisdom, but it will also be the natural price of progress. But even if we accept this more optimistic interpretation, we still need to recognize that 2026 will mark the end of an extraordinary era in human history. For thousands of years, our species valued the individual pursuit of deep knowledge. We celebrated thinkers who dedicated their entire lives to understanding a single fundamental question. We built entire institutions dedicated to preserving and transmitting accumulated wisdom. All of this is coming to an end, not through catastrophe or authoritarian suppression, but through gradual obsolescence. The temples of human wisdom will become museums. The rituals of deep thinking will become historical performances. The last sages will become keepers of traditions that no one else needs or wants. And perhaps, in the end, this is appropriate. Perhaps each phase of human evolution has its own type of wisdom suited to its specific needs. Perhaps the wisdom our species needed when we lived in small communities and depended on accumulated experience to survive is genuinely different from the wisdom we need now that we can instantly access all human knowledge and process it through artificial intelligences. The question that remains is whether this transition, even if inevitable and perhaps even beneficial, in the long run will cost us something essentially human that we cannot recover. When the last people who know how to think deeply and slowly are gone, will we have lost only an obsolete skill, or will we have lost part of our collective soul? 2026 will give us the answer to this question, whether we want it or not. And for those who have dedicated their lives to traditional wisdom, it will be a year of painful discoveries about how little their society values what they spent decades perfecting. There will be no war cries or protests in the streets. There will only be the cold silence of indifference, the casual contempt of a civilization that has decided they simply no longer matter. If these reflections have touched something you have been feeling, but perhaps have not found words to express, know that you are not alone. We live at a unique moment in human history, where the very foundations of what it means to know and understand are changing before our eyes. If you recognized yourself in the tensions we explored today, consider joining this ongoing conversation. By subscribing to the channel, you will become part of a community of people who share unease about these profound transformations and the desire to understand what they mean for our collective humanity. We do not offer simple answers to such complex questions, but we create a space where we can explore these changes together without haste, without the pressure for instant optimization that characterizes so much of our current world. This is a journey of discovery, and each reflection is a step toward a deeper understanding of the extraordinary moment we are living through. Join us to continue this essential dialogue about what we lose and gain when human wisdom meets its own limits in the age of artificial intelligence.
The situation is very difficult because we see that humans are losing trust in each other. The order is collapsing, both within countries and also between countries. Maybe the most worrying thing is that there is no leadership for humanity at the present moment. Because the strongest country in the world, the United States, now openly says that it cares mainly about making itself stronger, even at the expense of other countries. At this moment in history, what we need above all is to have good leadership that will unite humanity instead of dividing it in order to deal with both climate change and the rise of artificial intelligence.
When I think about climate change, one of the things that people should realize is what is the cost of preventing catastrophic climate change? What size of a check do you need to write if you want to solve this? How much money? And nobody knows for sure, but the best estimates we have, something like 2%, 3%, maybe 5% of global GDP. Now, this is a lot, but it's completely doable. If I told you it's 50%, then forget it. We are not going to do it. It's not like if you're a dinosaur 65 million years ago, when the asteroid comes, then don't bother. I mean, there is nothing you can do about it. But we are not like the dinosaurs. To shift even 5% of our resources from one field to another, this is what politicians do all the time.
It's usually the people who know how to weave a story that give orders to the people who merely know the facts. Suppose we want to build an atom bomb. You need to know some facts. If you don't know that E equals mc squared, you will not be able to build an atom bomb. But to build an atom bomb, you need something else. You need millions and millions of people to cooperate. Not just the physicists, but also the miners and builders and the farmers that feed all the physicists and engineers and miners and so forth. If you just tell them the facts of physics, look, E equals mc squared, now get to it, nobody would do it. It's not inspiring. You always need to tell them some kind of fiction, and the people who invent the fictions are far more powerful than the people who know the facts of physics.